Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being so patient with us while we get everything organized. My name is Erica Zerzin, and I'm the Public Awareness Coordinator on behalf of the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan. I would like to thank you for joining us tonight for the 2026 Healthier Brains presentation.
The title is called Living Well at the Table, Nutrition and Social Connection in Brain Health. So what's on the menu for this talk? I'm going to cover brain health and dementia risk reduction, sort of a general introduction into those topics. We'll talk about socialization and brain health, and then nutrition for health, the function of meals and nourishing for health, nutrition and social connection for brain health, and really the how. How do we do that? That's the meat of our topic today. So starting with brain health and dementia risk reduction, what's brain health? Well, brain health isn't the same as mental health, which would be more about emotional well-being, though they're related. Brain health, when we use that phrase, we're talking about the functioning of your brain to process thoughts, experience your senses, use language, make purposeful movements like your motor coordination, understand and respond to social cues and emotions as well. We want to look at brain health in terms of how we can optimize our functioning to live well. Now, what's dementia risk reduction? Well, first, we need to understand the difference between non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors for dementia. So, non-modifiable risk factors are things that can increase your chance of developing dementia that can't be changed. An example of this would be aging. It's a privilege to age, but with it comes some risk. Modifiable risk factors are the opposite. So these are lifestyle or behavioral factors that we can change. We can make changes that impact them. For example, dietary patterns, physical activity, protecting your brain from injuries. By working on these modifiable risk factors, we can prevent or delay dementia. So in 2020, the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention, Intervention, and Care was published, and it was a comprehensive research review. In this, they described the modifiable risk factors and how they contribute to the development of dementia. They noted that 12 modifiable risk factors account for about 40% of dementia worldwide. And in 2022, the Alzheimer Society released the first report of the landmark study, outlining how important risk reduction is, and noting that achieving risk reduction can be challenging in terms of increasing people's awareness of helpful strategies, knowledge, education, etc. And then also, if those strategies aren't supported by or achievable in the communities we live and work in, that's another challenge. In 2024, the Lancet Commission updated their research and they increased the estimate from 40 to 45% attributable to modifiable risk factors. And they expanded that list of modifiable risk factors from 12 to 14, adding in untreated vision loss and high LDL cholesterol. So if you take a look at this image, you can see that you can see the 14 modifiable risk factors that were identified by the Lancet. And it's important to note that the risk factors often operate together. We want to address them together rather than just focusing on only one of them and doing it really well while ignoring the others. They're also sometimes interrelated, meaning that working on one can actually add benefit to another. As scientific research progresses, we increase our understanding. We know that there are other risk factors that have been identified, and the body of evidence is accumulating about these. For instance, we know that diet may on its own be a modifiable risk factor. We also know that diet mitigates many of the modifiable risk factors that are identified and plays a strong role in addressing some of those risk factors. In that we can change our dietary pattern and our intake to reduce risk of chronic diseases that affect dementia or to manage chronic diseases that we have. So diet's an important component of multi-domain approaches to target risk reduction for dementia. So this is my last bit on the background about risk reduction. So how does risk reduction for dementia work? Well, if we look at the blue boxes on the side. These are the modifiable risk factors, and they're thought to operate on four general domains or ways to promote brain health. These are shown in the red boxes in the middle, either by decreasing vascular damage, reducing dementia neuropathology, reducing physiologic stress and inflammation, or by building cognitive reserve and brain reserve. And you can see that certain factors may operate on more than one domain to reduce risk, and that the risk reduction is connected, which means that sometimes reducing one domain of risk will also have a positive effect on another domain, and so on. And all of these function to prevent and delay dementia or prevent or promote brain health together. So that was it for our science and epidemiology lesson for the day. Now, the focus of today's talk is nutrition and socialization. So how do these work to promote brain health? So let's first talk about socialization. We know that socialization is good for our overall well-being, and how socialization impacts brain health specifically is by improving our cerebrovascular health through stress reduction experienced by positive social connection and interaction, and then also by increasing our cognitive reserve through participating socially, engaging in thoughtful social interactions, meaningful social interactions, and the like. Researchers are currently trying to develop an understanding of the dose, like how much socialization is needed to realize a cognitive benefit in ourselves. So, how much and what kind of social activities are beneficial for brain health specifically? Right now, there isn't a definitive answer. There's not a do this much of this activity at this time. We do know that it's better to have regular social activities as opposed to sporadic. Possibly more might be better, but there's probably a limit to it as well, and that may vary by individual. So when we say regular, we do mean about 3 or more times per week. And there's also some evidence to suggest that a variety or different types of social activities might be beneficial as well, not just solely focusing on one type of socialization or social activity. So, why is social connection important for brain health? Well, it helps us to build that cognitive and brain reserve. It reduces stress. It can foster a sense of purpose, so bringing meaning to our lives and why we're here and why we exist. It can provide mental stimulation, which is then again, in turn, going to help us to maintain or build cognitive and brain reserve. And neuroplasticity, so the brain's ability to form new connections that allow the brain to learn or to adapt to changes that it experiences, is fostered through social connection. And just a special note on caregivers and persons with dementia. Research shows that social and leisure activity engagement is protective, and it can reduce care-related distress experienced. And as well, research shows that nutrition risk increases among dyads of caregivers and persons living with dementia. Often, caregivers will prioritize the nutritional health of the person with dementia, and sometimes at the expense of their own overall health or even their nutritional health. And then this also contributes to then that overall poorer health, which can become a cycle. And we also know from research that caregivers and persons with dementia experience more social isolation together and limit activities. So we want to think in terms of dementia friendliness when we talk about social connection and social activities, because it becomes ever more important. So shifting gears, now let's talk about nutrition for health. So everyone has a personal preference or personal experience and a preference about their own eating. We know that food and drink are core components of that human experience. Some people eat to live and others live to eat. And most of us find ourselves somewhere in the middle of these two features where we do have to eat to live, but we often enjoy it, and part of eating gives meaning to the living component. So, whenever we think about nutrition and healthy eating, we want to consider the physical health benefit of eating and fueling our bodies, and also the quality of life benefit that comes from enjoying food. We need to stay aware of these two sides of the nutrition coin, as it were, knowing that each is really important. Ideally, we strive for a balance where both aspects are contributing to our good health and well-being. But we also need that awareness that the scales may tip to one or other at different meals or at different times in our life. So let's talk nutrition and healthy eating or healthy aging and dementia and the mechanism of action. I lied when I said the science lesson was over tonight. So let's look at the how. So poor nutrition can have both a direct and an indirect effect on our bodies. So what do I mean by direct? Well, directly, what we eat goes into our body, and through digestion, metabolism, and absorption, there are direct effects like oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, deficits in cellular energy production, and inflammatory mechanisms. And these are experienced by our cells, our organs, and our body as a whole. And the effects of this can contribute to our risk for or experience of aging, healthy aging or not, and our risk for or experience of dementia. And then indirectly, the pattern of what we eat accumulates over time and it builds up and it impacts our overall body and health. It determines our weight and our development of or our experience of certain health conditions that can then enhance or limit the ability of our body to respond to the direct impacts of poor intake, and then also become risk factors themselves for poorer health outcomes. And you can see how the two are very interconnected and affect one another. So there's a lot of research on healthy patterns of eating that can enhance health and can reduce risk of dementia. Though this isn't the topic of today's session, tonight we're not going to be talking about those dietary patterns. I did want to quickly mention the Brain Health Food Guide that was developed by a Canadian team of researchers, because often people have questions in any realm about the what should we be eating? And this is a good guideline that you can use. It's available online. It's evidence-based and describes a pattern of eating that promotes brain health, as well as tips to incorporate healthy eating into our daily routines. So, what's the function of food and eating? Well, eating often provides a structure to our day. Excuse me. Food and eating are opportunities to nourish ourselves and to meet our needs. And I mean needs very generally, speaking in terms of our physical, physiological needs, our psychological needs, and our social needs. And we're going to dive into each of those more specifically while you bear with me as I'm getting over a cold. So, what do I mean by physical or physiological? Well, food provides nutrients to fuel our bodies. We literally do have to eat in order to survive. Our nutritional requirements and individual nutrient needs are going to vary from person to person based on the stage of life we're at, our sex, our activity level, health conditions, etc. We aim for a pattern of eating that meets these physical needs so we fuel our physical body in a regular way, not waiting until we're so hungry or thirsty that we can't function. And that pattern helps us to stay in balance, if you will. And safety. Our food needs to be safe to consume for our bodies to process it and use it properly in the physical way. So we don't eat spoiled food. We don't eat contaminated foods or foods we're allergic to or intolerant of. And last, we may have health conditions that require us to modify what we eat for therapeutic reasons to manage our health condition, or we may have to follow medical nutrition therapy to treat a particular disease or health condition. So, moving on to psychological nourishment, food itself plays a bigger role in our lives than solely our physical well-being. In terms of pattern, we're habitual beings, and patterns of eating can provide comfort and security to us. The knowing the expectation of what we're going to eat. planning for that, etc. Similarly, the ritual of a mealtime can be a pattern that's important. For some, it may be with gratitude practices or blessings, and for others, it may be the act of sitting down to eat and mindfully engaging in that meal. Food preparation itself can bring feelings of satisfaction and care for self and care for others. It can also provide feelings of self-efficacy or accomplishment. Eating can be a source of pleasure in and of itself, as well as we experience our food, the way it tastes, it smells, the different flavors it has. And it's important to remember the distinction between food and nutrients in terms of our psychological well-being and health. I like to say that we consume nutrients, but we eat foods. Food's more than just the nutrients that fuel us. It's the experience of that taste, either the variety of flavors and foods that we eat, or the familiarity of those foods that we enjoy and love to have regularly. And food can also be an expression of our personal identity itself, a way to be creative and express that identity, or to express our cultural identity. And both are very important considerations for our psychological health and nourishing it. And last, the social aspect of nourishing ourselves. Think of nutrition as an opportunity to gather or interact and engage with others. An easy way to structure a social encounter is over a meal or going for a coffee. So, what about our nutritional environment when we think of that in terms of, is it social? Are there opportunities to be social related to nutrition? And not just thinking about gathering around eating, but are we shopping for food, preparing that food, and of course, eating it in a social way when we can? And maybe not all of these activities need to be social, or maybe they don't need to all of the time. But it's important to consider the social role that they can have and how that social engagement might help us to feel connected with others, with our community, with larger society, that kind of thing. Even limited small social interactions in a daily basis can contribute to overall well-being and that feeling of social connectedness. And research does show that this is important. So having meaningful social connections around things related to nutrition, like grocery shopping, food preparation, etc., might be something to consider. And then connection. We do know that food brings people together at our kitchen tables, at bakeries, butcher shops, restaurants, gardens, etc., in communities and at events. And in that way, we can always use food and nutrition to build social connection with others. It seems like a very natural fit. So the big question is, how do we enhance socialization and social connection through nutrition? And that's what we're going to tackle for the remainder of our time tonight. So, what we eat, where we get it from, and how we gather around it are all opportunities for social relationships to begin and thrive. And there's a very lovely organization called the Foundation for Social Connection that did a report on how to engage across the lifespan in terms of cross-sector integration through systems and in terms of socialization. And what they said about food is really interesting. It said food spans the farms that grow it, the systems that distribute it, the people and places that prepare it, and the tables where meals are shared. Across cultures and communities, food can bring people together, build relationship, and create shared experience. Whether it's a family dinner, a congregate meal, or a simple coffee break, food has the potential to create a sense of belonging, bridge divides, and nurture emotional bonds. So, a really nice way of saying we can use nutrition to foster socialization and social connection. But before I go further, I want to pause and have you consider two things to frame the remainder of this presentation, and they're related. First is the statement, perfect is the enemy of good. Good enough is just that. It's good enough. There's nothing wrong with wanting to improve or wanting to work towards bettering ourselves, but perfectionism can get in the way of doing anything at all. It can hold us back from just doing something good. Waiting for things to be perfect can just get in the way and stop us from any type of action. So I want you to hold that thought in your mind and think perfect is the enemy of good. good enough is good enough. The second is that balance is aspirational. I've already said that once tonight. We want to work towards balance, but it's really tricky to do all the things that we need to do for our health in a perfectly balanced way. Sometimes we aren't going to achieve balance in a certain area, and that's okay. We just keep working on it. It's our overall patterns that matter the most. So I want you to hold this in your mind as we go through the next sections. Things don't have to be perfect, just good. And let's also have some self-compassion when we don't achieve this perfect balance that we're all aiming for, especially when it comes to nutrition and our health. So, thinking about socialization and social connection, let's talk about meal times. Meal times are an opportunity to gather or interact. Food brings people together. Again, kitchen tables, restaurants, community settings, etc. Thinking about our environment and our nutritional environment, we want it to be safe, appropriate, comfortable, and to foster socialization. And think about each of these factors in terms of, is your food environment safe? Is it appropriate? Is it comfortable? Does it foster socializations? What about your meal times? You can have a meal in somewhere safe. You could have a meal in your bathroom. Is it appropriate? Maybe. Is it comfortable? Again, maybe. Does it foster socialization? No. And for some people, it would be incredibly uncomfortable to have a meal in the bathroom. And all of these features work together and can help build on one another to foster socialization. But think about the environmental factors in terms of living with cognitive impairment or dementia as well. Are there ways to alter that environment to make it safer or more appropriate or more comfortable for someone with dementia? And are there ways that the environment can better foster socialization? Just as one example, through managing the noise or the amount of distraction in the area, for example. And then in terms of connection, we want to consider connection and how we can purposefully form connection through sharing a meal or even just a drink together. So what are some suggestions to build social connection via meals? Well, special occasions are always a time to build connection and have discussion and gather with family and loved ones you might not see often around a birthday or a holiday, those kinds of things. But also consider regular pattern. Is there a way to regularly share meals with others? Maybe we don't live with them, but is there a way that we can connect with them and make the time to share a meal as a regular occurrence in our pattern of eating and living? And with that, we want to think about creative solutions. Maybe we don't live close to people, or maybe the weather's bad. Well, is there a way to do this virtually? If we do have that connection, everyone tonight is accessing this presentation and being a part of it through a virtual connection. Is there a way that we could learn to use a Zoom link to eat together and, sit with our phone and socialize while we eat using that virtual technology to our advantage? Or is there a way to build a meal club or something like that, where you have a group of friends or loved ones that connect and weekly share a meal and you alternate the person's house, and maybe everyone brings a certain dish, or maybe someone prepares the meal that week, that kind of thing. Thinking about creative ways to engage this if it's not part of our regular routine or regular pattern to have others around while we eat. I've listed be intentional. We want to really be intentional about the social connection while we're eating and enjoying meals. Plan that social aspect just as you would the food that you're going to enjoy together. Maybe have conversation topics at hand. Maybe turn off the distractions and really consider connection over distraction. Don't watch TV, sit down and discuss. Or if you are watching TV, do it together and discuss the TV, pause the show or the sports program that you're watching if you have that ability, and talk about it while you're connecting over the meal. But really purposefully and intentionally plan to connect socially and talk about the food, That's a natural thing to stimulate conversation or about your day or other topics of conversation that you feel help you to build that social connection. Next strategy I want to talk about is cooking. So, cooking is actually a complex task that uses your cognitive skill known as executive function. It involves planning, organizing, possibly following a recipe, managing your time, completing multiple tasks in a particular order. It can help you maintain certain skills or learn new skills, like, for example, particular knife skills and holding your knife in your hands in a certain way to cut, or particular cooking techniques or different ways of cutting the foods that would affect the way that you prepare it and taste and flavor in different ways, or the cooking techniques that you want to try with a certain food item. It can, excuse me, you can exercise creativity, try new ingredients, experimenting with spices or flavors. There's sensory stimulation aspect to cooking. The sight, smell, taste aspect are all engaged as you work to create that dish that you're preparing. Cooking can also provide a sense of purpose where you're intentionally engaging in an activity that's meaningful and important to your health, especially if you have set a goal about cooking more or trying different healthy recipes or healthy foods to incorporate into your diet. That intentionality and that intentional engagement and intentionality can impart a meaningfulness to your daily living. Cooking can also be a place where you experience stress reduction. Cooking requires your attention, so your focus has to be on your task at hand, otherwise, it can be dangerous. It has that defined beginning, middle, and end to it. There's a flow. You know that there's a predictability of the cooking processes, and that can counterbalance the uncertainties of the day. There can be a sense of relief from following a recipe to completion and producing that meal. And that can reduce our stress. And then self-efficacy, that ability and confidence that you can do something, that you can complete a task successfully, that can be promoted through practicing our cooking, especially if you achieve the intended result. But this is also where self-compassion comes in. If it's not perfect, that's okay. Is it good? Is it edible? And if not, well, take it as a learning opportunity and try again. And so when we think of all of these ways that it's stimulating cognitive health, cooking does support brain health. So what are some suggestions to build social connection via cooking and food preparation? Well, there's that adage that many hands make light work. So you can socially engage to cook together and prepare a meal together with someone, because that collaboration and working together requires communication, and that communication is going to build connection. It ensures that you're staying connected with the person that you're working with so that you're successfully collaborating to not get in each other's way and not bungle up the recipe or make mistakes. Cooking together can create shared experiences and camaraderie, even in the failures. Even, I don't want to call them failures, and the mistakes. Even when we've made a mistake in the kitchen, it can sometimes be really funny and create that sense of shared enjoyment and camaraderie. There's a mutual support that you're working together on a purpose and shared sense of accomplishment that you're preparing something together. So that togetherness is really fostered, the connection, you're developing memories, you're sharing experience together. You can also be transmitting different cultural values or goals to try new things together. And all of these things build our social connection, our sense of belonging with others. So, a little note on dementia-friendly organization to support cooking. Mise en place is a fancy way to say getting everything ready ahead of time so that when you want to do the cooking, the preparation is done. So doing all of the chopping, measuring, etc., it makes more dishes, but it also allows you to be more organized and not rushing around and dividing your attention between tasks. So it creates a better focus where you focus on preparing all of the ingredients and setting them out, then assembling all together. Keeping a clutter-free counter, and possibly if there is challenges with cognition, that clutter-free counter, maybe the mise en place, you're bringing the certain ingredients together and they're being assembled on a more blank counter where there's less distraction of all the different um, food ingredients and the different tools that are used at each stage of preparation. So keeping the focus and clear. Adaptive equipment might be important, especially for safety. You can purchase cut-proof gloves. They're sort of a thin, metally mesh glove that then the knife won't slice through if there's some challenges with movement and motor coordination, things like that. You can use food scissors instead of a knife. They're sometimes easier to handle. And getting a slip-free cutting board so that it doesn't move on the surface and make it easier or confusing or frightening or distracting in certain ways. And if you don't have a slip-free cutting board, a sort of simple hack is to put a very thin tea towel, dampen it, and put it underneath so that it holds it in place. Sometimes visuals or pictures of the cooking instructions and the different stages and steps are important. They can be a visual cue to help foster that understanding. And then technology supports using things like your cell phone to set timers, or if you have technology like an Alexa, for example, and you can say, Alexa, set a timer for this. Alexa, remind me in 2 minutes to do this. And then it will help do the reminders, the cueing, and sort of keep you on task. Use that technology if you have it to your advantage. But if it's confusing, don't use it. So connecting via cooking. Well, what are some creative strategies to do it? Again, that virtual space might be a way to cook together, choose a recipe, and then each prepare. If you can't be together physically, use the virtual bridge, get on a Zoom call, and cook your meal together or visit while you're cooking different meals even. But using that connecting time to discuss what you're doing, this is also something that sometimes can be helpful if you're supporting a loved one living with dementia at a distance, that you join them virtually on the call to provide reminders and help them to cook and prepare their foods. Intergenerational cooking is lovely, where older adults, possibly grandchildren or nieces, nephews, cousins, other family friends or loved ones and their children, cooking certain things that are part of your identity, part of your traditions or your cultural traditions with them, and imparting that knowledge can be really lovely intergenerational connection way. And you're teaching and connecting and building that purpose and connection through that cooking. Also, cooking groups, maybe gathering, um, forming a group with friends, relatives, loved ones, and forming a cooking group where you create large batches of foods that you then can have meals for several days, or that you can freeze, or other types of food preparation that you can do together that helps you in your other days ahead, or for time that maybe you don't feel that well or aren't going to have that much energy, but you're all gathering together and doing that. I've noted to play to your strengths. So play to your strengths in that if you like the planning better than the doing, be a planner, gather everyone, get them motivated and make the plan. And then maybe they'll take more of ownership of the operating part of the chopping and prepping and cleanup, maybe. Um, or play to your strengths, meaning teach others, show them how what you do. If you have a particular skill in cooking and food preparation, teach them, teach others what you do and learn from them as well. You want to maybe also challenge yourself. So the ways that you're not they're not your strengths, that you want to learn and grow and develop and can continue to engage your mind in that challenging with new food techniques, cooking techniques, new recipes, etc. And intention, be intentional about it. Think of that cooking intentionally as a way to support your physical health and also your psychological health, and then also your social health. And sometimes setting that intention reframes it to be more enjoyable than it would be if you view it as something that you just have to do and something to get out of the way. So being intentional about the planning and the thoughtful enjoyment of it as well. So moving on to food and eating chores. This one I want you to approach as an intentional reframing from thinking of them as annoying chores to potential social events, either mini social events where during the different things like meal planning, grocery shopping, etc., that you just have little interactions with people throughout it, or being intentional and reframing it to actually be a social event. So meal planning, connecting with a friend or loved one to actually share recipes and talk about what you're going to eat that week, maybe mirroring each other so that you have this connection and you can talk about the food that you liked and didn't like and things like that. It can help to inspire you in terms of a healthy eating goal. It can help to inspire you to try new things, try new ways of food preparation, or try new food items, etc. Grocery shopping, maybe go with someone, make it an actual social outing. Go together, get your groceries together, talk and chat while you do it. Um, Instead of racing through the store and just thinking of it as something that you have to get done, make it an actual social outing and an event where you connect and you leisurely shop and you talk about what you're buying and why and just your other ways of connecting and with someone else in that experience. That also could help you in terms of doing things like bulk purchasing. If you share that, then maybe you can split up different bulk items that would make the food also more affordable. I know that's top of mind for everybody given the price of groceries nowadays. But that connection, it's gonna, help you in terms of the social connection, but it can also have these other health benefits to it. Prepping foods together as well. Maybe you buy groceries and then go to someone's house and prep your vegetables for the week, for example. That can feel like an annoying chore, and then you don't do it, and the vegetables sit in the fridge and you don't grab them because you know you have to clean them and chop them and deal with them. Well, instead, maybe make it into a fun prepping your foods together and then take them home and they're just more easily accessible. Anything can be socially connecting if you make it so. I've also listed become a regular. Go to the same store, get familiar with the staff, know who they are, make chit chat. Even that can add to your day and be a positive source of socialization, especially if you're having a rotten day or you're feeling disconnected from others, or it's just sort of a lonely day. Having that a regular, I know these people, these are the people at my coffee shop, these are the people at my grocery store. That familiarity can actually be quite beneficial to our health and well-being. And then lastly, I want to look at more broadly at community level engagement and nutrition to build social connection. So I've said things about shopping, grocery stores, grocery shopping together to make it a social event, etc. But also you want to think about your community in terms of initiatives that you can make it more socially accessible for people. So dementia-friendly community initiatives. Go to your grocery store and say, do you have a dementia-friendly shopping time? Have you thought about creating dementia-friendly grocery shopping days or times of day or several times per week? This would mean they often reduce the noise. They don't stock the shelves and create clutter and distraction. They don't put those little alarms on before they start the sprays in the produce section to keep the vegetables and fruits fresh, things like that. Slower, more purposeful, going through the aisles and all of the staff aware of how to um, engage people with cognitive impairment and dementia and offer help and service to them. So, trying to work with your community to create things like that. Similarly, not just grocery stores, but restaurants. Are there restaurants that would be more appropriate, or restaurants that would be amenable to saying, yeah, we're going to have a dementia-friendly eating environment, and this lunch, it's going to be quieter. The staff are going to be trained and understand how to engage more purposefully and meaningfully and promote that social aspect of it? Or is there a section that could be roped off, or not roped off, but reserved for, or a side room or something like that? So talking in your community about how you can make these different places and spaces more friendly for persons with cognitive impairment and dementia. And then generally, in terms of nutrition and social connection, community events. There's many different community events. Look for the community events that are happening around you and see what different things like fall suppers, church suppers, different social gatherings where you're going to be able to eat and gather and connect. Volunteering for different food organizations. That's a great way to keep nutrition top of mind and help others that are in need. If you have a food bank or a local soup kitchen or any of those sort of emergency food pantry areas, volunteering. You'll work with others, you'll stay socially connected, and you'll contribute positively to nutrition in your community. The last one I've got listed is collective kitchens. Maybe you don't have a friend group that wants to gather and do something like a meal club or a food preparation club or a grocery gathering, those kinds of things. Well, you could look to different organizations in your community and see if they would support you having like a sign up and creating your own collective kitchen where a group of people, you'll get to know them. You'll pool some money and buy groceries and participate in cooking a meal together. You have the lovely, nourishing meal and the social connection all in one, and possibly can help others who maybe don't have as many skills with cooking. You can build the group purposefully that way and invite others in, serving that sense of purpose and also social connection. I have to give a plug to our Cognitive Kitchen project. So this is a research program that we've developed to take the different healthy eating patterns and put them into practice. It's a culinary medicine program where we go through the dietary patterns to support brain health, dementia risk reduction, and actually prepare foods that align with those patterns, learning different food skills, culinary technique, food preparation together. And there's a social dimension to that as well. And this is a screen grab of a master's project done by Julie Beidel, who's the facilitator of the Cognitive Kitchen. She's a registered dietitian. And through piloting it, she did show that there is a way to support social engagement in a virtual culinary um, program. And that's really important. It had never been done before, but she did show that this is possible and that you can build this connection virtually as a way to mitigate distance, weather, ill health, etc. So a recap, how do we enhance socialization and social connection through nutrition? We use our meals, our cooking practices, our food and eating chores, and our community engagement to redirect in any way that we feel comfortable to create social connection. And when I say any way that we feel comfortable, ways that add value to your life and don't feel like they add stress. You want them to be enjoyable to you. You're going to have to tailor it to your abilities, wants, and needs, and be very intentional about thinking about the social engagement and planning for that social engagement through each of these different paths. And I'll remind you that perfect is the enemy of good. If you're going to wait until your house is exactly decorated as perfectly as you ever want it to be and as clean and tidy as you ever want it to be, if you're going to wait for that, to have people over to enjoy a meal, you might be waiting too long. Good enough, clean enough. People will ignore the mess and take comfort in good company and good food. As well, if you're waiting for your food skills to be perfect and to become a gourmet chef, that again, you may be wasting time where you could be connecting with others and learning together. Some of the best memories are funny food mistakes. Uh, I'll share the story of a work team, a research team that I work with. We had a team building where we all virtually gathered and made different meal together, and it was kind of fun. We all had the same ingredients. We were walking through the recipes together. And really funny, the first time that we did it, I was facilitating the group, and mine was the recipe that failed. It absolutely didn't turn out the way it was supposed to, and we had a good laugh. Another time that we did it, the very best memory, and I mean, it will live on in infamy. One of the researchers, exceptionally skilled person, so smart, so good at everything, but really never embraced cooking, never didn't develop any of those sort of cooking skills, so was excited to try and to learn. And there we all were, the research team, and the researcher was saying, wow, like I actually feel really proud of this. I actually mastered this. And suddenly we saw smoke and they quickly muted themselves because their meal was on fire. And I mean, those are the kinds of things that build memories. And again, what was salvageable, they ate and enjoyed it. It was, we all ate together at the end. But the point being, perfect is the enemy of good. Good is good enough. And sometimes mistakes become beautiful oops that turn into memories. And then balance is aspirational. It's the patterns that matter the most. Having self-compassion when we don't meet our goals and we don't, what we've planned doesn't execute exactly the way we want it to. That's fine. It's the pattern that matters. Try again. Try again. So, in summary, when you're thinking of nutrition for brain health, you want to think about the physiological aspects, that personal, individual psychological aspects, and of course, the social aspects. And I hope I've given you some ideas on how you can enhance the social connection through nutrition in the different ways of meals, chores, cooking, and community. And I really want to thank everyone for their patience with the technical difficulties at the start. Tonight, I gave you what I'd call an overview, a taste, if you will. And of course, if you have specific needs that require more in-depth consideration or consultation, seek help from a registered dietitian. There's many private practice dietitians. If you have health benefits, or get a referral for one of the the dietitians working in community that will see patients through that mode. March is Nutrition Month and Brain Health Awareness. So I want to say thank you so much for having me, and I will entertain questions if you have some.
Thank you, Allison. Your story at the end about perfect is the enemy of good really reminded me of my sourdough journey. I appreciated the funny story there at the end. But I really enjoyed your presentation. It got me thinking about how cooking and getting together with others for meals uses so many different skills and brain functions to ultimately support our brain health. And there's good reminders in there that there are so many opportunities to make cooking and more fun and meals way more meaningful. So thank you so much. As Allison said, we soon will be getting to questions. So please enter them in the Q&A box if you haven't already. And while we are giving Allison a bit of a rest on her voice, I will tell you a little bit about the Alzheimer Society. So the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan's vision is to live in a world without Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. And the mission is to empower people to live well with dementia through the delivery of programs, services, advocacy, awareness, and of course, research. Our provincial office is located in Regina, and we do have resource centers across the province and in Saskatoon. And actually, in the 2024-25 fiscal year, the Alzheimer Society of Saskatchewan served over 3,300 clients from 360 different communities across Saskatchewan. And it is I need a minute for my voice too. Sorry about that. It is important to note a couple things. You do not need a formal diagnosis to get in touch with us. So we support those affected by Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, as well as people who just have questions or want some information. We have resources and knowledge about many types of dementias and situations. What you can expect from the Alzheimer's Society is that it is focused on creating and building a community of support that is rich in information, experience, and services. We create connections and provide services that people can turn to and tap into when they are needed. We offer a variety of opportunities to help our clients learn about dementia, coping strategies, and community supports and services so we can help people connect that are impacted by the disease with others who are going through similar circumstances. Overall, we, like Allison's presentation, we really just want to focus on creating a place for people to connect and to share their experience and knowledge. We offer support groups as well for those in early stages of the disease and caregivers, which are invaluable supports for those throughout the province of Saskatchewan. This allows people to exchange information with others living with and affected by dementia, access the most current information, learn and share practical tips for coping with change, decrease feelings of loneliness and isolation, and express feelings and be reassured that these feelings are normal. Hopefully to find a sense of hope. Okay. Again, you can change this slide, please. We will now get to questions for our presenter, Allison, obviously. So we have some here in the chat. Lots of questions. Okay. When referencing the social connection, is that specifically for people who are retired?
So the question is social connection only for people who are retired?
Yes, I think, does it have benefits for every age, or are we more benefits for the older population?
So it has benefit at any age and stage of life, and it's really important to us all throughout the life cycle in many ways. And often when we talk about it, and I'm thinking now that my presentation might have had more focus on that or given that element, because when we're in school or when we're working, we typically do have more regular social connection, and when we're retired, we have to think a little bit more about it and plan for it. Otherwise, we could end up spending more time on our own. But having said that, there's a lot of ways that when we're working, we might not actually foster social connection. And I should include examples of that being, you know, eating at your desk, not leaving your cubicle or your office, or working from home all the time, not taking that space to eat and to use your meal time, like your lunch or your breaks, to connect with someone else. And that really is important. And if you can, I know sometimes we feel like we're too busy to take that pause, but even if it's only a short amount of time when we're eating, eat with a friend, eat with someone else. Or if you can't give up any time in that way, have an eating meeting, like have your lunch while you're meeting and engaging and talking a bit about what you're eating, but also what you're working on. Using that workplace to create maybe a meal club or potlucks or different things like that, especially if one or more of you are working on different goals to support healthy eating or changes in your eating pattern. that social aspect helps to galvanize you on that goal and work together and bring motivation to it. So yeah, social connection super important throughout your entire life, and different ways to plan for it and to incorporate it into your regular daily being at different stages.
So it's a kind of a follow-up question to that. As people who are busy working, and maybe don't have that with their coworkers, is there any other suggestions for social environments that you may recommend? I know that you mentioned volunteering and things like that.
So different recommendations outside of a workplace for social connection. Yeah, volunteering for sure. Checking into different opportunities like that, different community groups that you can join. Um, you know, I always give a plug for public libraries. What a absolutely great and essential service to every community where they exist. If you are lucky enough to have a physical library in your community, check out the announcements board. They often have a lot of different community events, and community organizations will list what they have. Ask the librarians and the library staff. They're often very connected in the community, and one of the things they like to do is create connections. So I'd go straight to them if you're feeling like, hey, I don't really know how to make connection here, and I'm not gonna go out and get a job and work with others, or I don't feel like volunteering for a different organization. Head down to the library and say, how do I get some connection, some social connection in my life? What are things I can join in our community? And then when you do, think about the nutrition things that you can add on to them.
Making me think I need to go for dinner with my friends more often. Thank you, Allison. There's a question here. If someone is not eating a balanced diet, will they benefit from supplements?
Um, it depends. And that's a question that you'd wanna discuss. Ideally, you'd want to talk to a dietitian and have them do a nutritional assessment, a comprehensive nutritional assessment on that person, yourself, whoever it is, and talk to you about what type of supplements. Are they specific nutrients that you're missing? What does eating poorly look like? Um, is it micronutrient supplementation? Which ones? Or is it actual macronutrient? Do we need to think about a meal replacement drink to replace? There's all sorts of considerations, and that really does have to be tailored to the individual. So there's unfortunately not an easy answer to be like, yeah, take this pill, you'll be fine. It's eating is very complicated, and you have to think about the whole person, the other considerations and health conditions that they might be dealing with, and which nutrients may need to be limited or increased because of that. So you really do need to check that out if you can. If you have extended health benefits, make an appointment with a registered dietitian. You can look up the private practice dietitians in the province. A lot of them work virtually. They're wonderful people. Think of it just the same way you would going to a physical therapist.
I like that answer, and it can bring out all the dangers of getting your health information off of social media and not from a trained professional as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, do these brain strategies make a difference once a diagnosis has been made?
So if someone's diagnosed with dementia, so the risk reduction strategies, they are helpful for healthy living. And so the general rule of thumb is we don't have as much evidence there because the research is limited. And that's a real shame and a real reason why we need more research in the field of dementia. But I'll give the example of the different nutrition strategies because that's what I know the best. Those are going to be helpful to your cardiovascular system. We always say things like what's good for your heart is good for your brain. If you have a diagnosis of dementia, following the dietary patterns is still going to confer benefit to your brain in terms of the physiologic properties and reducing further damage if that makes sense. So it can slow the decline and support health and other prevent other chronic conditions from layering on as well. So yes, they can be helpful.
And so, kind of following up with that, when there are food lists and they say there are foods that should be avoided, can these actually promote a dementia risk?
Hmm.
There's a question about that.
Trickier to answer. So when on the brain health food guide, it says foods to promote and foods to limit or avoid. And that just means don't make them a regular feature of your every single day. And the food that I like to give the example of is bacon. There's tons of research why bacon is maybe not going to be the most healthy choice. And for the most part, people do understand this. On the other hand, bacon tastes good and people, like some people, not all, but some people really love it. So you want to have bacon sparingly and really enjoy it when you do, like have it intentionally, but don't have bacon be the main food item of every single meal as a regular part of your pattern. Have it as sort of a highlight. So when they say things like limit or avoid, they're saying not this shouldn't be the biggest thing on your plate every single day.
Right. Thank you. There's someone that is asking, they say thank you, obviously, but what is cognitive and brain reserve?
Oh, maybe I didn't explain that very well. I may not have even explained it at all. So when we say things like your cognitive reserve, that's when you've learned a lot of different things. What's the best example? It's when you're able to access something else in place of if you've lost an ability, you have an adaptive ability because you had that reserve. A really fast example of that would be if you know 5 different ways to say pretty and you're losing some of your language, well, maybe you only know 3 of them now, but you had 5. Beautiful, pretty. Oh dear. And now I've given an example where I can only think of two ways to say that. Attractive,
Gorgeous,
gorgeous.
stunning. Yeah,
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for helping me. And then
of course.
if you're experiencing some decline, maybe you only have 3 of them, but because you learned 5 of them, you can still access others when you're word finding. I'm not sure if that's a good example, but it's that, and like when we think about it in terms of the physical brain, it's having more neurons, the cells of the brain, connections between them, and more of them. So when you're learning, you're actually making more connections. So if one connection becomes impaired or isn't functioning as perfectly as it used to, you can rely on another connection. And that's what's meant by building up that reserve.
Oh, well, thank you. Now to switch it up from that, you mentioned inflammation. Would you be able to expand on that a little bit? I know that's a broad question, but
Um, that's a that's a whole big topic.
full
Um,
presentation. Yeah.
yeah, so the term is also tricky because a little inflammation is going to be experienced when we eat, digest, absorb. A little inflammation is going to be experienced when we move our muscles and our body, and that's how the muscles learn like that they need to grow and that they develop. So a little bit is good, but when we talk about inflammation in terms of a mechanism for dementia. It's the different accumulation of too much inflammatory processes. So in terms of if you think about when I said we eat certain nutrients and they act on our cells in different ways, some can actually promote inflammation and some can help reduce inflammation. So the different healthy dietary patterns have a lot of nutrients that help to reduce that inflammation and less amounts or quantities of those that are going to promote inflammation. So you want to have lots of different color in your diet. You want vegetables, fruit, lean proteins, different, all those different foods that contribute to a healthy dietary pattern as they work together and have that nice, I hate to use the word, but balance for your body.
So not bacon. Can you clarify what kind of meats you mean by lean protein? Like what, it looks like we have some meat eaters in the chat asking questions, so they want to know which are recommended.
So when you think about your protein choices and specifically when you look at meat, there's the different cuts and the different ways that they're prepared. You're looking at those that have less fat. So anything where it has loin in the word, like tenderloin, those kinds of things. But you're heavily where fat is added to already fatty meats, so like sausage, cured meats, things like that, they're going to be less healthy and you want to have them less often. But the leaner cuts where or poultry like your chicken, your turkey, your pork loin, your tenderloin, your steak, which are also unfortunately more expensive, usually cuts of meat.
There's a follow-up comment to they've been hearing a lot lately about inflammatory processes and hormones and the negative effect it has. So thank you for clarifying that response. Um, there are some Cognitive Kitchen fans and participants on here that send their well wishes and said that it was a fantastic program. There is some information or some interest about if it is continuing and how to be involved in that in the future.
Well, we wrapped up what I would call Cognitive Kitchen 1.0. So we had 2 years and um now I've lost the exact number, closer to 200 than not participants participate in the program. We learned quite a bit. I hope others learned from participating in the program too, but we learned quite a bit. There's never a perfect time. Um, And we really wanted to test that, trying out different days of the week and different times of day to see if that would be better for specifically for care partners and persons living with dementia to participate. And we couldn't, there wasn't a time that was like, this is the time to do it. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, noon, 1, 2, there wasn't a great time. It's all over the map. So one of the things we learned was maybe we need to have something where the the teaching component, like the what you're going to learn, isn't synchronous. And this would also maybe help people who are trying to learn and focus and do the things, but need more time and maybe need to think a little bit more and are slower to do things. So we want to make an asynchronous recorded session guide, and then have a weekly just join in meeting. So we're going to trial that. So stay tuned. There'll probably be some communication from the Alzheimer Society once we'll likely the end of the summer that we'll have this ready to trial, ready to try out and see what we can do. And the other thing, I know that I've talked a lot about social connection and promoting it, but sometimes learning or this kind of thing where you're joining with a group of people you don't know, maybe that's not your cup of tea. So maybe just watching the recordings or watching it as a group. There's other ways to do it. So we're going to adapt the program and do Cognitive Kitchen 2.0 coming soon.
Well, congratulations on that. That's very exciting.
Mhm.
Um, to switch it up a teeny bit, we just have a couple more questions left. So if you haven't typed your question in, please do so now as we will be wrapping up shortly. But are you able to speak at all about hearing loss and how people, not only with Alzheimer's and dementia, but can overcome that issue with social interactions and hearing loss and difficulties with conversations?
Well, hearing loss is really one of the risk factors that is quite connected with the literature on social connection, because one of the things people naturally do if before the hearing loss is affecting them at a level where they're not functioning super well, like where they're going to seek help for it, sometimes they actually withdraw socially, and they don't necessarily notice it right away, but it's because they're having trouble hearing or keeping up with the conversation and going, pardon, pardon, that kind of thing. So being aware and getting your hearing tested and looking into it just as you would any other aspect of your health is important. And if you do experience some hearing challenges, get it tested and see if there's interventions that can help it. For like a hearing aids are the ones that we always think about. But also, I actually experienced some hearing challenges a few years ago, and I went to have my hearing checked, and I had perfect hearing, and it was one of those, but I can't hear. Like, I can't hear people. I'm constantly going, sorry, sorry, or going, I can't hear the TV. And it was jaw. And I actually had to get physical therapy because my jaw muscle was so tight and I was clenching my teeth apparently that it was pulling, and so that it sort of collapsed or like pulled and strained. So my eardrum was not hearing, like the vibration of sound was not getting to my eardrum the correct way. So there's audiologists, and I mean, you can get referrals through your doctor, but check this out. If you think that you're experiencing some hearing loss, check with your doctor. It could be things like wax buildup and needing your ears cleaned. It could be something musculoskeletal that a physical therapist can help you with. It can be getting a night guard so that you don't clench your teeth when you sleep, things like that. Or it could be actual problems with the inner ear, and that can be solved by a hearing aid. Now, there's also, if it can't, mouth reading, having people engage in different assistive devices like we called them talkies. I can't remember what they're called, where you have the speaker, the headphone, and you have someone speak into it. There's different helping devices, and use them, and don't be embarrassed to use them. It's how you're going to connect and stay connected with other people. We're getting
Yep,
better at
thank
that
you.
as a society, but we still need to work a bit.
Yeah. Well, and as we know, sometimes access to those specialists can be difficult for people, especially in rural settings. So hopefully one day everybody will have easy
Yeah.
access to that. Um, that so one more question. When we're talking about nutrition, is there a relation between gut health and brain health that you could possibly talk about, a connection?
Oh yeah, that is a really big topic of research and interest right now. The term, and that you will hear it eventually, is the gut-brain axis. And it's thought that the microbiome is passing like this axis between the gut microbiota and the brain health, that we don't understand it yet, but we know it's there. We know that there's connection between having that healthy gut, healthy microbiome, and brain health. And we don't it's just starting to build the research. Very interesting. So when we talk about things like the microbiome and we say having a healthy gut, it's promoting the healthy microbiota in the gut, in the intestines of the body. And in order to do that, we need them to exist there, but we need to feed them. And how do you feed them? It's through fiber. So when your body digests fiber, different fibers, it produces these substrates called short chain fatty acids that that's what the microbiota need to eat. So you have to feed it. You have to digest fiber in order for them to have food that they eat, and they live in your guts and create this health effect. So really one of the reasons that we promote fiber, well, things like satiety, fullness, the different foods that it's usually present in are also really nutritive and wonderful, but also for the fiber itself and the variety of different fibers. So, um, fiber for your gut health, fiber for your bowel health, fiber for your microbiome. So your whole
Everything things. No.
grains, plants, different pulse foods, etc.
Wonderful. Thank you. It would seem that we are finished with the questions. Again, a lot of thank yous, some familiar names in there. So Allison, I would really like to thank you again for presenting with us. And if anybody has any follow-up questions or would like to talk to us a little bit more about this, please feel free to email us at friends@alzheimer.sk.ca, or of course call our dementia helpline at 1-877-949-4141.